He entered the restaurant as if he believed the world owed him respect. Expensive suit, arrogant expression, and the impatience of someone who confuses education with servitude. Right at the entrance, he found a young receptionist with a calm smile, Lívia. But instead of kindness, he offered contempt. "Have you worked here long?" he asked dismissively. "Because you seem quite lost in what you do." The nearby customers looked at each other. Lívia maintained her composure, responded sweetly, and led him to the best table. The man had no idea that the employee he had just humiliated was in fact the hidden owner of the restaurant, someone who preferred to observe customers before being recognized. And that night, he would learn, in the most elegant way possible, that respect is the most expensive dish on the menu. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because in this story, arrogance will be served with a generous dose of irony and justice. The clock struck 7 o'clock at 2. Night when the lights of the Belle Vie restaurant began to shine over the busy avenue of São Paulo. It was a cold night, and customers came in looking not just for dinner, but for some comfort. Between the waiters and the aroma of fresh herbs, Lívia he moved elegantly behind the counter, welcoming each person with a kind smile and a sincere look. She wore a discreet uniform, her hair tied in a simple bun, and her posture was firm and conveyed serenity. But no one there knew that the woman, always so polite, was the real owner of the restaurant. By choice, I worked as a receptionist from time to time. I believe the best way to understand your own business was to observe people's behavior up close, especially when they thought no one was looking. That night she would have proof of why she did this. At 7:40 p.m., the door burst open. A tall man in a dark suit and with an impatient expression walked in with his cell phone pressed to his ear. He spoke loudly, without caring who was listening. "I can't believe you messed up again," he roared. "You're paid to solve problems, not to give me a headache." He hung up the phone and took a deep, huffing breath. He looked around, assessing the place with the arrogant gaze of someone who thinks he is superior to everything. He approached the counter, where Lívia was waiting for him with the same calm smile as always. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Belle Vie. Do you have a reservation?" she asked kindly. "Reservation?" he scoffed. "You think I need a reservation to eat here?" Some people nearby looked up discreetly. Lívia maintained her posture. "Of course, sir. I can check for an available table in the main hall." "Just do it," he replied, without even looking at her, drumming his fingers on the counter. "I'm in a hurry." As she typed into the system, the man sighed loudly, glancing at his wristwatch theatrically. "My God, how can it take so long? Just look up a name." "I apologize for the delay, sir. The system is a little slow." "Today. The system or you?" he retorted with a sarcastic smile. Lívia stopped for a moment, not because she felt offended, but because that kind of behavior said a lot about people's character. He took a deep breath and replied, still calmly, "Call me slow, sir, but I guarantee your table will be perfect." He laughed, not understanding the subtlety of the answer. "We'll see. I hope the food is better than the service." She led him to a table near the window, where the view of the city stretched out like a sea of lights. As he walked ahead of him, some customers whispered about the man's rudeness. Lívia, however, did not change her tone or expression. He just gently arranged the table and said, "Here you go, sir. Would you like something to drink?" "A wine, the most expensive one you have, and bring it quickly." She nodded and walked away, walking to the counter to pass on the order. Behind her, the man took his cell phone out of his pocket again and began making a video call, speaking loudly enough for everyone around him to hear. "I'm dining at a fancy restaurant," he said, boasting. "But honestly, the service here is disappointing. The receptionist seems lost." A few uncomfortable glances passed across the room. Lívia heard every word, but didn't react. He simply served the wine elegantly, without spilling a single drop. The man, however, didn't even say thank you. "Finally," he murmured. "I thought I'd grow old waiting." At that moment, the restaurant manager Carlos discreetly approached Lívia. "Do you want me to talk to him?" he asked in a low voice. "No," she replied calmly. "Let him be. Sometimes people reveal who they are when they think they're on top." Carlos nodded and walked away. Lívia returned to the counter, observing the customer from afar. There was something about him that wasn't just arrogance. He was the kind of person used to using power as a shield, and she knew from experience that people like that always learn the hard way. While he was complaining to the waiter, demanding his undivided attention, a couple entered the restaurant. The polite man asked for a table and waited patiently. Lívia greeted them with the same serene smile and led them to the other side of the room. As he passed the arrogant customer's table again, he heard him mutter, "This place is full of random people." She just responded with a look, a firm look that said everything without needing words. Fate had already noted that name, and soon he would discover that true power lies not in being served, but in knowing how to serve with dignity. The hall of the beautiful life was full that night. The sound of glasses mingled with the soft hum of conversation, and the scent of dishes fresh from the kitchen hung in the air like a promise of pleasure and elegance. But at the table near the window, a presence stood out from all that harmony. The Mr. Marcelo Vasconcelos, the arrogant customer, turned the environment into a stage for his own impatience. He drummed his fingers on the table, sighed loudly, looked around disdainfully. Everything about him seemed calculated to attract attention. The waiter Jonas, young and attentive, approached with the menu in his hands. "Good evening, sir. May I suggest our shrimp risotto with Sicilian lemon? It's the most popular dish in the house." Marcelo raised an eyebrow. "Shrimp? No, it's food for people with unrefined taste. Bring something more exclusive." Jonas, unfazed, responded respectfully, "We have the filet mignon with truffle sauce, sir." "Great," Marcelo interrupted, "but it has to be quick. I don't want to wait like I did at reception." The word reception came out with venom. Lívia, watching from afar, listened. She pretended to review a list of reservations, but her gaze remained attentive to his every gesture. I knew that kind of behavior, and I knew that, sooner or later, life would find a way to give back what was sown. While the order was being prepared, Marcelo turned, his cell phone back on. He spoke loudly, boasting about business deals and figures, assuring that fine dining was a routine thing. Some customers began to exchange glances. The couple at the next table even got up and asked for another table. Such was the arrogance in the air. When Jonas returned with the wine, Marcelo received him impatiently. "Finally," he said, without looking at the waiter, "I hope at least the wine is worth the price." Jonas carefully opened the bottle and poured the glass, avoiding any eye contact. Marcelo picked up the glass, swirled the liquid, and after the first sip, frowned. "It's lukewarm," he complained. "Don't you know how to serve it?" "I apologize, sir. I can bring another bottle if you wish." "No, I don't. I want to be served right the first time." The tension in the hall grew. Some eyes turned to Lívia, as if expecting her to intervene, but she remained serene, watching silently, noting every detail in her mind. He knew the lesson to come would, need no harsh words, just the truth, served at the right time. A few minutes later, the dish arrived. Jonas placed it in front of Marcelo with the same care as always. But before even tasting it, the customer turned up his nose. "It looks nice, but if it's anything like the service, it probably doesn't taste good." The table next door fell silent. It was as if everyone was waiting for the inevitable. Marcelo cut a piece, tasted it, and, in a theatrical gesture, dropped his cutlery onto the plate. "I was right. It's flavorless. Is this what you call haute cuisine?" Jonas, visibly embarrassed, tried to answer, "I'm sorry if it's not to your liking, sir. I can ask the chef to prepare another dish." "No need," he replied coldly. "I just want you to know that the problem with this restaurant isn't the food, it's the kind of people who work here." The words echoed through the hall. The waiter walked away with his head down. Lívia from the counter felt her chest tighten. It was the kind of insult that hurt more because of its tone than its content. She took a deep breath, keeping calm. He picked up the internal phone and discreetly called the kitchen. "Ask the chef to prepare the house dessert, and bring it to Mr. Marcelo's table personally." On the other end of the line, the cook replied, "The house special?" "Yes," she said, "but tell me it's a gift from the restaurant owner." While the order was being prepared, the atmosphere calmed down again. Some customers whispered among themselves, indignant at the lack of respect. But Marcelo, oblivious to everything, was fiddling with his cell phone, laughing at something he read on the screen. The waiter returned with dessert, a perfectly assembled bowl of tiramisu, topped with chocolate shavings and a small gold plaque that read, "Respect is the rarest flavor in the world." Marcelo frowned. "What is that?" "A courtesy of the restaurant owner," Jonas replied with a slight smile. The man looked around, confused. "Donut? What?" "Donut." It was then that, on the other side of the room, Lívia began walking towards him. Eyes turned to her, and the room fell into absolute silence. With each step, the sound of heels echoed like the ticking of a clock about to mark the exact moment of change. Marcelo, not understanding, shifted in his chair, trying to regain his air of superiority. When she stopped before him, the entire room already knew. The moment of truth had arrived. The hall of the beautiful life sank into an almost solemn silence when Lívia started walking towards the customer's table. Her steps were slow, steady, and each click of her heels on the marble floor seemed to carry the weight of a truth that was about to be served. Marcelo, the arrogant man, straightened his jacket, forcing a smile of superiority, the kind of smile that tries to hide discomfort. She stopped before him, with the same serene expression as before. "Good evening again, sir," he said calmly. "I hope the main course and dessert met your, expectations." Marcelo leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "The dessert is good," he replied provocatively. "But something's still missing. Maybe service worthy of the prices you charge here." Some customers exchanged tense glances. The waiter Jonas, standing a few meters away, seemed ready to intervene. But Lívia slightly raised her hand, asking him not to say anything. He looked at Marcelo kindly and replied, "You're right. Service is a reflection of the house. And, for that very reason, I think I should truly introduce myself." Marcelo frowned. "Introduce? What do you mean?" She straightened her posture, took off her receptionist badge, and placed it on the desk. "My name is Lívia Azevedo, sir. I'm the owner and founder of Belle Vie." The air seemed to disappear from the room. The distant sound of a glass falling onto the counter echoed like a small clap of thunder. Marcelo's eyes widened in disbelief. "You... what?" Lívia kept her gaze steady. "I'm the owner of this restaurant, and I chose to work at the front desk because I believe respect starts at the front door." His face lost its color. For a few seconds he tried to laugh, thinking it was a joke. "This is some kind of test, isn't it?" he asked, trying to regain control of the situation. "No, sir. It's just the truth." She looked him in the eye, and in that instant, all the weight of his arrogance began to dissolve. The customers watched in silence, and even the waiters seemed to be holding their breath. Marcelo ran his hand through his hair, disconcerted. I didn't know." "And you didn't need to know," Lívia replied. "Respect doesn't depend on positions or surnames." The sentence fell on him like a subtle but accurate blow. Those calm eyes, which he had despised minutes before, now reflected something he couldn't bear. "Shame," she continued, her voice soft but firm. "I like to observe people without them knowing who I am. That way I see who treats me well because it's right, and who only does it out of self-interest." "I didn't mean to." He tried to justify himself. "Yes, you did," she interrupted without raising her voice. "Every word you said was chosen to belittle someone. But look, the world has a curious way of reversing roles, doesn't it?" The silence in the hall was absolute. Marcelo lowered his gaze, unable to respond. The waiter Jonas watched him from afar, and a slight smile formed on his face. Not of irony, but of justice. Lívia turned and looked at the other customers. "I apologize to everyone for the embarrassment," he said elegantly. "Belle Vie values good food, but above all, a good heart." People applauded discreetly. It wasn't a show of applause. It was an applause of agreement, of silent recognition. Lívia bowed slightly and turned her gaze to Marcelo. "Your account, sir, is paid. Consider it a courtesy of the house." He looked confused. Don't need charity. It's not charity, she replied. It's a reminder. Sometimes what we need most is not to pay a bill, but to learn the value of respect. Marcelo stood up slowly, trying to regain his lost dignity. He looked around and realized that all eyes were on him. For the first time, not as someone powerful, but as someone small in the face of his own attitude. He took a deep breath, looked at Lívia, and murmured, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." She just nodded. "I hope that one day, sir, you will learn to enter any place with the same respect with which you wish to be received." He didn't answer. He picked up his jacket, took one last look at the room, and left in silence. The door slowly closed behind him, and the sound of wind rushing in through the final crack sounded like a collective sigh of relief. Lívia stood still for a moment, looking around the room. Then he returned to the counter and replaced the badge on his chest. The waiters approached, one by one, thanking her for her gesture. Jonas, with tears in his eyes, said, "Thank you for speaking for all of us." She smiled. "I didn't speak for you. I spoke for him." Sometimes pride is just the hunger of someone who has never been looked at with empathy. The maitre d' turned off some lights, the atmosphere returned to its normal rhythm, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The night wore on, but everyone knew something had changed inside, not just in the client, but in everyone who witnessed that silent lesson. The door of the beautiful life closed slowly behind Marcelo Vasconcelos, and with it was the muffled sound of murmurs and glasses clinking. Outside, the cold night air hit her face like an uncomfortable reminder of reality. He walked slowly down the sidewalk, trying to process what had just happened. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if shame had taken shape and now followed him like a shadow. The streetlights reflected in the glass of the shop windows, and in one of them, he saw his own reflection, the same man as always, well-dressed, expensive watch, confident expression. But behind that image there was something new, a crack. That confident expression now seemed empty. He got into the car but didn't start the engine. He just stood there looking at his hands, remembering the look in his eyes. Lívia, a look that carried neither hate nor irony. It was worse, it carried compassion, and that completely disarmed him. He had faced competitors, lost contracts, survived crises, but nothing hurt as much as being confronted by someone who reacted to humiliation with grace, because he could face anger, but dignity. That made him feel small. Minutes later, the cell phone vibrated. He was one of the business colleagues. "Dude, what was that? Is the woman the owner?" Marcelo took a deep breath and replied, "Yes." "My God, you looked bad on film." He ended the call without saying anything else. The silence inside the car weighed more than any speech. He stood there for a few minutes until, without realizing it, he started laughing. A nervous laugh, half trembling, half painful. "The restaurant owner, the receptionist," he murmured, still in shock. "And I treated her like she was nobody." He leaned his head against the steering wheel and sighed. For the first time in years, his self-image began to crumble. That night, Marcelo didn't go home. He drove aimlessly through the streets of São Paulo until he stopped in front of a small neighborhood restaurant. The lights were almost out, and a lady was arranging chairs inside. He got out, of the car, and knocked on the door. "It's closed, sir," she said with a tired smile. "I know. I just wanted to ask something." "Say, why are simple people so kind, even when the world is not kind to them?" The woman looked at him curiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "Because kindness is the last luxury that life cannot take away from us." He stood still, not knowing what to answer. He thanked her and returned to the car, carrying that phrase like someone carrying a mirror. At home, he took off his jacket and threw it on the sofa. He paced back and forth, unable to shake the feeling of discomfort. He sat down at the table, opened his laptop, and typed Belle Vie restaurant. The news talked about the success of the place, about the concept of human experience before cuisine, and in every article there was a photo, Lívia Azevedo, smiling among the employees. He enlarged the image and observed. She looked at peace. And in that moment, he realized how much he envied that tranquility. He closed the laptop and fell silent. For the first time, he felt like apologizing not out of obligation, but out of genuine regret. The next morning, he woke up early. The sun had barely risen and the city was still waking up. He opened the wardrobe and, on impulse, left the suit hanging. He put on a simple shirt and jeans and went out. The path to Belle Vie felt different, as if the city, which had once been the setting, was now part of the lesson. When we arrived, the restaurant was still closed. Lívia was outside talking to one of the employees and holding a cup of coffee. When she saw him approaching, she raised her eyebrows slightly in surprise. He stopped in front of her, took a deep breath and said, "I came to apologize." She kept silent. There was no coldness in his gaze, only curiosity. "I was arrogant, unfair, and ridiculous," he continued. "You treated me with respect when I deserved none." Lívia placed the cup on the table and replied, "And what did you learn from that?" He thought for a moment and answered truthfully, "That respect is the only dish that should never be missing from a table." Lívia smiled, for the first time since the episode. "Then perhaps you have finally understood the taste of shame." Marcelo nodded. "And it was the most bitter dish I've ever tasted, but also the most necessary." The clock was showing 7:30 at night when Marcelo Vasconcelos stopped again in front of the illuminated facade of the beautiful life. It was the second time in less than 24 hours that he had crossed those doors, but this time the reason was different. There was no arrogance in his gaze, nor the haste that always accompanied him. The man who entered now seemed smaller, not in stature, but in ego. The hall was full, and the atmosphere, as always, exuded elegance. Lívia was in the background, discreetly observing the waiter's movements. When she saw him enter, she felt a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Marcelo walked to the counter and stopped in front of her. "Good evening, Mr. Vasconcelos," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Good evening, Mrs. Azevedo," he replied humbly. "And I didn't expect to have to go back." For a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. There was no longer the tension of the previous night, just a restrained respect. "What brings you here?" she asked. "Yesterday I was everything a man shouldn't be," he said. "Today I want to try to be what I should be." Lívia crossed her arms, listening attentively. Marcelo continued, "I thought a lot about what happened, about how I treated you, the waiter, everyone here, and I realized that my lack of respect wasn't a slip. It was a habit." He paused, swallowing hard. "I spent years confusing authority with superiority, and yesterday, for the first time, someone showed me the difference." Lívia kept her gaze fixed on him, without interrupting. Marcelo took a deep breath and took a small envelope out of his pocket. "Inside here is a check. It's not to pay the bill, nor to buy forgiveness. It's a donation to the scholarship program I saw on the restaurant's website. I saw that you help young chefs study gastronomy. I want to contribute to that." She stared at the envelope for a few seconds, then looked up at him. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I do," he replied, "because I need to give something back to this place, and it's not the money that will make up for it. No, it's the gesture." Lívia took the envelope, without looking at the amount, and placed it on the counter. "Money is useful, but gestures are only valuable when they are accompanied by change." "I know," he replied, "and that's why I want to talk to Jonas. I want to apologize in person." The waiter Jonas, who had been watching everything from afar, approached cautiously. Marcelo turned and looked at him sincerely. "I was an idiot yesterday. I spoke to you as if you were invisible, and yet you treated me with respect." Jonas smiled, a little embarrassed. "It's okay, sir. We're used to this kind of thing. And that's exactly what's wrong." Marcelo replied firmly. "No worker should get used to being mistreated." Those words echoed in the hall. Some passing employees discreetly stopped to listen. Lívia, with her arms crossed, watched attentively. Marcelo continued, "Yesterday, I came in here thinking respect could be bought. Today, I leave knowing it can only be earned." Jonas nodded. excitedly. "You are forgiven, sir, and thank you for coming back." "Don't thank me," Marcelo replied. "Just promise me that if someone ever treats you the way I treated you, you'll remember that the problem isn't with the one who serves, but with the one who forgot how to be human." Lívia approached, lightly touching Marcelo's shoulder. "Do you realize what you just did? To embarrass you again?" he asked, half laughing. "No," she replied, smiling slightly. "To inspire." The atmosphere, previously tense, was now filled with an unexpectedly light atmosphere. Some customers who had been discreetly watching the scene began to clap softly, as if recognizing something beautiful happening before their eyes. Marcelo looked around, not knowing where to put his hands. Lívia gestured for him to sit down. "Stay. We'll serve the same dish as yesterday. Only this time, I want you to taste it slowly." He hesitated. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," she said. "Sometimes forgiveness tastes better than revenge." Marcelo sat down and Jonas brought the dish. The same filet and truffle sauce. This time he ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the moment. When he finished, he looked at Lívia and said, "It's the same dish, but it has a different flavor." "Because now," she replied, "you have tasted it with your heart." When he left the restaurant that night, there were no judgmental looks, just small smiles. Outside, the wind blew lightly, and Marcelo felt a peace he no longer remembered. He looked back and saw the illuminated sign of "Beautiful Life" reflecting on the wet sidewalk. "Belle Vie, beautiful life," he murmured. "I think I finally understand the name." And as he walked down the street, he understood that true wealth was no longer in the bank balance, but in the lightness of having rediscovered his own respect. 3 weeks had passed since the apology. The beautiful life, it was still full every night, with reservations in high demand and a lighter atmosphere than ever. The employees were still talking about the episode that had become almost an internal legend. The arrogant man who had learned his lesson in front of everyone and returned to ask for forgiveness. But what no one expected was to see him again. That Friday night, Lívia was reviewing reservations when he saw a familiar name on the list. Marcelo Vasconcelos. 2 people, he read in a low voice. A small smile appeared on his face. So he came back. She went down to the reception, but this time not to disguise herself, but to welcome him as her own, with the same respect she offered everyone. At 8 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Marcelo entered, without a suit, without an expensive watch, without the air of superiority that once defined him. He wore simple clothes, had a serene look in his eyes, and carried a small box in his hands. Beside him, a humble-looking woman with gray hair tied in a bun observed the place with enchantment in her eyes. "Good evening, Mrs. Azevedo," he said, smiling. "I promised I'd be back." "And he did," she replied. "Welcome back to Belle Vie." Lívia noticed the curious look of the woman beside him. "This is my mother, Dona Teresa," Marcelo introduced. "She was the one who taught me respect and patience. I thought it only right to bring her to the restaurant where she taught me the rest." Lívia smiled, touched by the simplicity of that gesture. "Mrs. Teresa, it's an honor to welcome you. I hope you enjoy our menu. If the food is prepared with the same care they're giving me, it will be perfect," the woman replied sweetly. They were shown to the same table as the first time, the one by the window. But now the atmosphere was different. Marcelo no longer saw the waiters as subordinates, but rather as partners in an experience he finally understood. The waiter Jonas approached, with a smile. "Good evening, Mr. Marcelo. It's good to see you again." "Good evening, Jonas," he replied, shaking his hand firmly. "And thank you for showing me that day what it means to be truly professional." Jonas was visibly moved. "It's rare to hear that from a customer." "That's the least I should have said from the beginning," Marcelo added. During dinner, Dona Teresa watched her son with admiration. "You know, Lívia," she began as the main course was served, "my son was always a hard-working man, but sometimes he forgot that success can make us blind." "That happens to a lot of people, Mrs. Teresa," Lívia replied. "But the important thing is when we can see again." Marcelo smiled, looking at both of them. And you both opened my eyes. In different ways, but equally valuable. The conversation flowed smoothly. Between dishes and discreet laughter, dinner became something much more intimate than a meal. It was a reunion of values, a new beginning. When the dessert arrived, Marcelo opened the small box he had brought. Lívia raised her eyebrows in surprise. Inside was a small metal plaque, engraved with the words, "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." "I want you to put this on the wall in the hall," he said. "Not to remember me, but to remember what this place taught me." Lívia held the sign carefully, her eyes welling up. "It will be placed right at the entrance, where everyone can see it." Donna Teresa smiled. "Nice words, son. I learned it here, Mom," he replied emotionally. "In this place, and with people who knew how to teach me the lesson I needed most." When dinner was over, Marcelo got up and went to the counter. He paid the bill and insisted on leaving a generous tip, saying, "It's not about the value, it's about gratitude." Lívia squeezed his hand. "You are no longer the same man who came in here weeks ago." "I hope it never will be again," he replied, "because now I understand that respect is the only investment that always brings a return." He and his mother said goodbye and walked to the door. Before leaving, Marcelo looked back. The room was full. The aroma of food mingled with the laughter of the customers, and the illuminated sign reflected the word Belle Vie on the wall. This time, he didn't just see a restaurant, saw a symbol, the place where he lost his pride and found humanity. On Monday morning, the beautiful life was silent. The curtains, still half open, let in a soft beam of golden light, illuminating the empty hall. The distant sound of pots and pans echoed from the kitchen, and the smell of fresh bread wafted through the air. It was the beginning of another day, but for Lívia, that would be a special day. In her hands, she held the small metal plaque that Marcelo had left. The words engraved on it seemed simple, but they carried a profound weight. "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." Lívia ran her fingers over the letters delicately, as if caressing a living memory. He took a deep breath and looked at the main wall of the entrance, the first place any customer saw when entering the restaurant. There, he decided that it would be the new home for that message. He called Jonas and Carlos, the manager, to help her install it. "Right here above the counter," she said, pointing. "I want everyone to see this before they ask for a table." Carlos held the ladder while Jonas positioned the sign. The sound of the hammer gently striking resounded as if marking a new beginning. When it was over, they took a step back. The silver sign reflected the morning light, glowing, almost symbolically. Lívia smiled. "There you go. Now this restaurant talks, even when we're silent." That same afternoon, the first customers began to arrive. Many noticed the new sign right away. Some just smiled, others commented amongst themselves, and some even asked to take pictures with her. It was curious how such a short phrase could touch so many people. A young couple who were walking in hand stopped in front of the message. "Pretty, huh?" said the boy. "Yes, and true," the girl replied. If everyone thought that way, the world would be a different place. Lívia watched from afar, feeling her chest heat up. That simple piece of metal had become something much more than an ornament. It was a reminder, not just to customers, but to employees themselves. In the middle of the shift, a new customer arrived. A man of about 40, well-dressed, with a closed expression. He hurried in, talking on his cell phone, and soon began to show impatience at the reception desk. "I don't have a reservation, but I want a table now," he said dryly. The receptionist, a young lady named Camilla, kept calm. "Of course, sir. Just a moment, please." "Just a moment?" the man replied. "It doesn't look very crowded." Camilla opened the system, trying to resolve it quickly. But before the man could say anything else, his gaze shifted upward, straight to the newly installed sign. He read in a low voice, "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." The phrase hung in the air for a few seconds. His tone changed. He sighed, straightened his jacket, and said, "I'm sorry. I think I'm being rude." Could you please find a table calmly? Camilla smiled, surprised. Of course, sir. Thank you very much for your understanding. On the other side of the room, Lívia observed the scene discreetly. Jonas, who also saw everything, approached her and whispered, "Did you see that? He was going to start just like Marcelo." "I saw it," she replied, smiling, "and it was stopped." By one sentence. That night, when the restaurant closed, employees gathered briefly in front of the sign. Carlos commented, "Funny, huh? We spend our lives thinking we need to shout to be heard, and sometimes all it takes is one well-placed phrase to change everything." Lívia nodded. Because respect doesn't need to be imposed. It needs to be remembered. Jonas looked at the sign illuminated by the last light in the hall. It's as if that sentence had a soul. "Yes, it does," Lívia replied. The soul of someone who learned the hard way and had the courage to change. Outside, it was already night. The city was still alive, with horns honking and hurried footsteps echoing through the streets. But inside Belle Vie, the atmosphere was peaceful. Lívia turned off the lights one by one, and the last one left on was the one that illuminated the sign. She stood before her, silent, and murmured to herself, "Sometimes a gesture is enough to transform a place." And when the last light went out, the phrase still glowed faintly, reflecting the streetlights, as if the restaurant had gained a new voice, one that spoke directly to the hearts of those who entered. It was a Thursday afternoon, and the beautiful life was closed to the public. The sun streamed through the large windows, creating golden spots on the wooden floor. The staff took the opportunity to clean the room, rearrange tables, and review the week's menu. Lívia, sitting at the counter, was writing some notes when the door slowly opened. "Are you still accepting visits before work hours?" asked a familiar husky male voice. She looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. "Henry!" he exclaimed, smiling. "I thought you were in France." "I got back a few days ago," the chef replied, entering slowly. "I heard Belle Vie is livelier than ever." "It's better," she said. "More human." Enrique smiled, placing his chef's hat on the counter. "I always said that the secret of a restaurant is not the seasoning, but the heart of the person serving." "And you were always right," Lívia replied. "I think I've finally managed to prove it." They walked around the room together, taking in the details. Enrique noticed the silver sign above the reception and approached. Read aloud, "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." Nice sentence. "And it was born of a difficult night," she said thoughtfully. Henry turned to her. "What happened?" Lívia took a deep breath and told everything. The arrogant client, the humiliations, the revelation that she was the owner, and the unexpected transformation that came after. As he spoke, Henry's expression changed from surprise to admiration. When he finished, he was silent for a moment, processing the words. "Do you realize what you did, Lívia?" he said finally. "You managed to turn humiliation into a lesson. That's rare. I just did what any person with a conscience would do." "No," he retorted. "Most people would fight back. You taught me that. And when justice comes slowly, it lasts longer." Lívia smiled, moved. "You know what's most curious? Since that day, the customers seem different. Kinder, more attentive. It's as if the atmosphere has changed." Henry nodded. "The atmosphere reflects the owner. And now Belle Vie carries something that not even the best recipe in the world can provide. Soul." They sat at one of the tables, and Henry watched the room in silence. "Do you remember when all this started?" she asked. "You were just an apprentice full of dreams, wanting to open a restaurant to show the world that food could heal people." "I remember," she replied, laughing. "And you told me the world didn't need more pretty dishes, but rather places with purpose." Enrique laughed along. "That's right. And look what you've created. A place that heals through experience, not taste." Lívia served 2 cups of coffee. As he stirred the sugar, he said, "Sometimes I wonder if I would have had the courage to act like this a few years ago." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because before, I would have let my pride get the better of me. I would have thrown the customer out on the spot, just to prove who's boss." But when you understand that leading is serving, anger no longer makes sense. The chef watched her silently, then smirked. So you've learned what the best cooks take a while to understand. Respect is the only seasoning that transforms not only the dish, but also the person preparing it. Lívia looked again at the plaque on the wall. Funny. When he gave this to me, he had no idea how much it would mean to so many people. Life is like that, Henrique replied. Sometimes the phrases that most impact the world are born in moments of pain. A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Era Jonas, holding an arrangement of fresh flowers. Sorry to interrupt. A gift arrived, Mrs. Lívia, he said. And it came with a note. Lívia took the envelope and opened it. The handwriting was known. Thank you for teaching me that respect is the true luxury. Marcelo Vasconcelos. She smiled, her eyes welling up. He keeps sending messages. Sometimes he just writes to say thank you. Henry laughed. So he became your student after all. In a way, yes, she replied. And I'm happy to know that a mistake can become a seed. The chef stood up, put his hat back on and said, Well, I have to go, but first, he pointed to the sign. Promise you'll never take that off? Never, she replied. As long as Belle Vie exists, this message will continue to illuminate whoever enters these doors. Henrique said goodbye and left, leaving her alone in the hall. Lívia stood in front of the sign once more. The reflection of the letters flickered in the light, as if the sentence had a life of its own. She smiled and whispered, Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish. And in that moment, she realized that the restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a mirror of what she believed about the world. It was a Friday morning when the sound of the doorbell echoed through the beautiful life. Lívia was in the office, reviewing reports, when one of the assistants came in with a white envelope in her hands. It arrived for you without a return address, said the young woman. Lívia raised her eyebrows, curious. He picked up the envelope and noticed the thick, richly textured paper. Opening it, he found an invitation printed in gold letters. We invited Mrs. Lívia Azevedo to the charity dinner Serving with the Heart. Location, Monte Real Institute. Date, Saturday, 8 p.m. Organizer, Marcelo Vasconcelos. Lívia smiled, surprised. That name no longer caused him discomfort, but curiosity. He was truly changing, and it seemed turning learning into something greater. The next night she arrived at the indicated place. The Monte Real Institute. It was an old renovated mansion, lit by yellow lights and filled with tables decorated with simple but elegant flowers. At the entrance, a banner displayed the event's theme. Serving with Heart, a charity dinner to support young culinary apprentices. Lívia remained silent for a moment, absorbing the scene. The waiters, dressed simply, moved calmly and gently. There was no excessive luxury, just purpose. When he entered the main hall, he heard a familiar voice. I knew you would come. He turned and saw Marcelo Vasconcelos, now wearing a blazer without a tie, with a sincere and serene smile. His eyes no longer carried the arrogance they once had. They carried gratitude. Marcelo, was this all your idea? She asked, impressed. It was, he replied. After what I experienced at Belle Vie, I realized I had a lot to learn, and maybe something to teach as well. So I founded this project. Project? Yes, he said. An initiative to fund gastronomy and customer service courses for low-income youth. I want them to learn the value of respect, patience, and service. Not just for work, but for living. Lívia was speechless for a few seconds. I didn't expect that. Neither do I, he replied, chuckling lightly. But that dinner changed the way I see the world, and I thought it was time to give back. They walked to the center of the hall. On a large screen, photos of young apprentices in community kitchens were displayed, smiling, holding dishes they had prepared themselves. Below the images, a simple caption read, Cooking is more than just mixing flavors, it's transforming lives. Lívia looked at it and felt a lump in her throat. That's beautiful, Marcelo. It's still in its infancy, he replied. But I want it to grow. And I want you to know, it all started with you." She shook her head modestly. "Not with me. With the way you chose to react. I only lit the candle. You're the one who kept the flame going." He smiled. "Even so, you are part of this. And for that, I wanted to thank you in a special way." Marcelo made a sign, and one of the organizers brought out a small frame. Inside it was a copy of the same sentence he had left at Belle Vie. "Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish." But below there was an addition, inspired by Belle Vie and dedicated to all who have learned that service is an act of love. Lívia brought her hand to her mouth, overcome with emotion. "Did you put this at the event?" "In all our courses, too. It's on the kitchen walls. I want every student to read this sentence before they start their day." She took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. "You turned a mistake into purpose. That's rare, Marcelo. It's the least I could do after what I learned." During dinner, Marcelo went up on stage to give a speech. The guests, business people, chefs, and ordinary people, listened intently as he told his story, without hiding the mistakes of the past. "I've learned," he said, "that respect is the ingredient that changes the flavor of life, and that service, when done from the heart, is the noblest gesture there is." The audience gave a standing ovation. Lívia watched from the table, with a mixture of pride and serenity. The man who had once humiliated her was now speaking about empathy to hundreds of people, and he did it sincerely. When the applause died down, Marcelo looked in her direction. The two exchanged a brief look, silent but full of meaning. There, without needing words, they recognized what had happened. The offender and the offended had become, without realizing it, each other's teacher and student. Autumn had arrived, bringing with it a mild chill and streets covered in golden leaves. The beautiful life was still full, now more than ever. After the charity event, the story of Lívia Azevedo and Marcelo Vasconcelos spread through the city like a modern legend, a story of redemption, humanity, and transformation. But that night, the restaurant was quieter. The lit candles on the tables cast dancing shadows across the walls, and a soft guitar filled the air. Lívia was alone, reviewing reports near the counter when the door slowly opened. She looked up and smiled. Marcelo was there. He wore simple clothes, had a serene expression and a small bouquet of flowers in his hands. "Good evening, Mrs. Lívia," he said with that restrained smile that revealed respect. "Good evening, Marcelo," she replied. "I thought you'd only be back here as a guest of honor." "I came back today as a customer," he replied, "but above all, as a friend." She led him to the window table, the same as before, where it all began. When they sat down for a moment, the silence spoke louder than any words. The hall seemed to hold invisible memories, the distant sound of a former arrogance, now replaced by gratitude. "You know," Marcelo began, "every time I come here I feel something different. It's as if this place reminds me of who I really am." Lívia smiled. "Belle Vie has this gift. It gives people back the taste of what is genuine." Jonas approached the table, happy to see him. "Mr. Marcelo, what a pleasure to see you again." "Jonas," he replied, standing up to hug him, "if it weren't for you, I might never have learned my lesson." "Ah, the credit goes to the house," Jonas said, laughing. "And to the owner, of course." Lívia just watched with a sparkle in her eyes. It was rare to see someone change so much, and even rarer to see that change last. Dinner passed peacefully. Marcelo tried the new dishes on the menu, praised the seasoning, and, at the end, raised his glass of wine. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to this place, which not only nourishes the body but also the character." Lívia raised her glass together. "And to the man who learned to serve, even when he no longer needed to prove anything to anyone." They toasted, and the delicate sound of the glasses echoed through the hall like a crystalline memory. It was the sound of peace found again. After dinner, Marcelo delivered the bouquet. "They're simple flowers," he said, "but they represent something important." "And what would that be?" she asked. "Gratitude, for treating me with respect even when I didn't deserve it, for showing me that kindness is strength, not weakness." Lívia held the flowers carefully. I just did what I would expect anyone to do if they were in my place. Exactly, he replied. But almost no one does. She smiled, moved. You proved that people can change, Marcelo. And you proved that forgiveness changes more than punishment, he said. Today I truly understand that. For a moment they were silent. Outside, the rain began to fall, lightly, beating against the windows. Marcelo looked around and saw the sign shining under the warm light of the room. Respect is the seasoning that cannot be missing from any dish. He smiled, touched by the memory. That phrase still guides me every day. And it will continue to guide many people after us, she replied. Because respect is not a fad, it is essence. When dinner was over, Marcelo stood up and looked around the restaurant once more. The sound of the guitar, the aroma of the food, the soft glow of the lights. Everything felt different. He knew he would never be the same man who had first walked in there. On the way out, he stopped in front of the sign, ran his hand over the letters and murmured, "Thank you, Belle Vie, for teaching me to be better." Lívia watched him from a distance, without saying anything. And when he walked out the door, she knew. That story had come to a close at just the, right time. Not with revenge, but with forgiveness. Not with pride, but with peace. True power is not in humiliating, but in welcoming. Respect is the only luxury anyone can afford, and the most valuable of all. And when empathy replaces ego, even mistakes become redemption.